Welcome to our 360-degree Around the Anvil chat with some of the smiths here at Baltimore Knife and Sword. We have some of your favorite questions in this helmet here. We're going to pull them out one at a time and do our best to answer them. To get it started, I'm going to hand it off to Ilya for our first question.
Okay. Nick Kronk 1999 asks, what is your guys' favorite metal to work with, and what is the least favorite, and why? Well, my most favorite metals to work with are W1 and W2 series. They're fairly simple, means I don't have to follow complicated systems of heat cycles, tempering, quenching, none of that. They're ready to go. I make most of my gravers from those steels. The least favorite steels would be unknown ones, the stuff you find on the side of the road. You don't know what they are, what is the heat specification on them. You don't know if there's cracks in them, whether they're hardenable at all. So I have to stick with the W series. Matt probably can give you a couple ones favorites that he knows.
Well, from grinding standpoint, AR-15 was one of my least favorites just because it was so abrasive resistant. But just about any steel works about the same for me. Starting on a 24 grit, that's a really rough grit. I don't care if it's high carbon, medium carbon, doesn't really matter. So pretty much as long as something's being ground on before it's heat treated, I don't care. At Ninja in Pajamas asks, what weapon that you have ever made are you the most proud of? Whew. For me, up until I did my first pattern welding, that was the defining measure of a smith, ones who either forge weld and those who can't. So for me, my very first pattern welded dagger blade that I did on my own, me and Kerry had done a few together, but up until that point, that was my first. It was a 1500 layer blade. I did some like kind of Viking-esque mounts on it. But to this day, I mean, that wasn't a perfect blade, but that's where everything progressed and everything changed for me. So I was very proud of that, still am. Just saw pictures of it the other day, still very proud of that. What about you, John?
I'd have to say my first pattern welded cutlass. The first time I had used the old ancient iron kiss. But it worked just fine, and it's one of those things, when you're new to something, you always expect something to go wrong, and you're still learning as you go, but it turned out pretty just right. So I'm very proud of that.
What about actual show projects, any of those?
Yeah, for me, you know, we get requests for pieces that typically those requests, they can kind of be punking us. We'll get a, well, they'll never do that because that's too complicated. And some of that certainly is true. Some of the things can't be done in the time limits that we have. But recently, we've done a couple of pieces that that I've been really proud of, where the whole shop's involved. But pieces that can be complex for the number of either moving pieces or the amount of folds and patterns laid in, as you've seen on some of the earlier stuff that Ilya did, some of his real big pattern welded blades that we haven't gone back to lately. They were really complicated.
Builds that have both of that, like the Phantom blade.
Builds that had both of that. I mean, the Phantom blade was really difficult for me.
Casting, mechanicals.
Yeah, where we ran very long, and we've had a couple of builds where I've had to work through the night just to finish my piece.
I know he has a favorite that just came out recently.
Well, in terms of weapons, the Kuromokuri is my favorite because at that time I thought it was a once-in-a-lifetime chance to work with the material sent from Japan.
Yeah.
But armor builds are really special to me because I don't get to do that often anymore because of the extended hours necessary to make that stuff. So I really cherish those builds.
At Sethi EBZXX, I believe. Being in a blacksmith shop, everything is really dangerous. So what's the worst accident you've seen happen in the shop?
Hiring
well,
Ilya.
I had a couple of broken fingers. We've had guys on a regular basis get metal shards put into our eyes, but I think Kerry might have a good comment on that one.
Yeah, I mean, we've all had pretty much had, you know, at some point metal in the eye where we've had to have a little shard scraped out, and that's an issue.
Sucks.
That's certainly part of it. I've had the top of this arm burned very badly doing some Damascus experimentation in the 80s when there was very little information on how to do that forging, and bad material selection and improper heat, and it actually can be pretty dangerous. I mean, you see us just kind of like right on top of the hammers and right into the forges now. But you know, most of us have 15 or 20 years of experience in it, so
And
it makes a difference.
you might remember Tony refers to his buffers as the wheel of death. As much as that is kind of a gag, at the same time, it is the most dangerous in the shop. We used to have really big buffers. Things would get thrown out of your hands, rapier guards. I've seen Kerry get hurt. I've seen Bruce back in the day got really hurt on that kind of stuff. Either the wire wheel or the buffer, you get too comfortable with it, just grab stuff and throw.
None of these tools are a joke.
It can do a lot of damage to your fingers or hit you back in the face. That's why you see us on a day-to-day basis. We almost always all wear face shields and stuff like that whenever we're using a machine in general.
At Lackhand Shoker asks, have you ever been tempted to make a billet from filings you grind off? Actually, we have. We've experimented with many different things over the years. Shoveling the pile of shavings off the floor from under the sander, run a magnet over it, hope you pick up the ferrous materials, scrape them off into a bag, and try to put them into a can and heat them up, flux them, and see what you get out of it. But we've been tempted to do that. Doesn't always work out very well. But
Ilya and I have an ongoing billet, too, that we take from little scraps of other Damascus or pattern welded builds and kind of put it in a C channel, and we just forge it up. And we haven't really done anything with it, but we keep adding to it here and there. But yeah, like he said, can welds, possible.
It's a way to spend a lot of money and make terrible steel.
Yeah, it is, but it can be pretty cool, too.
it's all the unknown impurities in there, especially coming off the sander
Aldo
belts.
Bruno, who supplies a lot of the steel for the show, he has specific shavings that he bags underneath his saw and stuff like that. Now, if you go that route, you know exactly what it is. You can add known powdered steels. You can go from there. But if, like, we just go for something under our sanders, it could be
You could have aluminum or brass in it.
It could be mostly,
And
mild
impurities from the
steel
sander
or,
belt, the abrasive.
yeah,
with
ceramics
sodium
and stuff from
carbide
the
or
belt.
aluminum
So
oxide or whatnot.
in some ways you can use your scrap, some ways you shouldn't. It's up to you.
And you'll spend a lot of money trying it.
At Neely Ben asks, what did your first knife look like? Well, it looked like crap. It cut like crap, it bent like crap, and it broke like crap. When someone starts out, they don't have the knowledge or the practical experience of working with the stuff. So you don't know what to select, so railroad spike. Sounds great, keeps the railroad intact. Why wouldn't it make a good knife? It makes a crappy knife. The skill, I didn't know how to hammer things right, so it was all crooked every which way. It wasn't sharp because I didn't know how to sharpen things right, and it was crap, atrocious. I threw it away. Now, the best way to get a good knife is to practice, and
Research.
practice not only on making knives, practice making other stuff first to control your hand. And once you control your hand, you can go back to a blade, and that's actually very simple after that.
My first knife was glorious.
Yeah.
And my first knife was a piece of band iron
Wasn't.
at a shop class in junior high school. So
You know, you guys are all lying. You bought your first knives at Walmart.
Well, that
we didn't have
Hey,
Walmart back then.
He got me my first
You
knife.
wanted something, you couldn't afford it. You had to make your own.
I made my first one in 7th grade. I got in some trouble at school, and Kerry would pick me up in some of the mornings and take me to the shop, and he taught me how to forge and grind it, and I don't know, I guess I was like 12, something like that. I still have it. I refuse to sell it. I've taken it to shows where people have offered me quite a bit of money for it. This is like an integral little forge knife with a twisted handle. It was ugly. Don't let that discourage you, like Ilya said. Stay at it. If your first knife looks like crap, your 50th knife should be not all that nice. If you're ahead of the curve and your 50th knife looks great, you're doing something good.
Experimenting.
Keep at it.
Trying.
Yep.
Yeah. Aware Resist Evo asks us, what got you guys into being a blacksmith?
It's his fault.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, I did come in from the blade end of it, and I came in from the stock removal end, and so becoming a blacksmith certainly wouldn't have called myself that early on. It is what we do now. I'm not doing as much as these guys are doing these days because I'm in different parts of the shop. But what really kind of got me into being a blacksmith was to create some more shapes that I couldn't create. So either making tools that I needed for other jobs, or creating specialty guards, things like that. Some blade forging. Very early on, I had a fair amount of interest in that, and I was doing a lot of that blade forging. But most of that really has passed to Matt and Ilya for me at this point. But I think we all kind of probably have a time when it was like.
Yeah.
you went from being a guy who just kind of got metal hot and tried to bend it to realizing that it was a very fluid material and that you could with time and heat and a little bit of knowledge, you could make that any shape that you want. And I think that's the transformative time when that material goes from being something rigid to something that's more like a clay. And that's the time that, for me, defines the beginning of becoming a blacksmith.
Yeah, for me, you know, I grew up with Kerry already making swords at the Maryland Ren Fair. I grew up there as a kid. Just the whole ambiance of that, it was like next level stuff. So it just naturally is what I wanted to do with my career. I thought I'd do a lot of different stuff. I went to school to be a computer geek. Just always kind of came back to the shop and never left. So I don't really have a complicated answer to that. I do, however, suggest if you want to get into this, you go to your local blacksmith guild. Just go to Google, type in your zip code and the words blacksmith guild. There will be one.
If you're in this region.
Yeah, somewhere within an hour of a drive, almost everywhere in this country, there's somewhere.
Quite
Outside
popular.
of this country, there's still other blacksmiths I'm not familiar with. Obviously, I'm here, but there are guilds almost
Yeah, if you
everywhere.
go to abana.org, it'll show you not only all of the affiliates in the United States, which is the vast majority of the blacksmithing groups in the state, but it'll actually show you people that are affiliates to Abana, which is the American version, in other countries as well. And then you can almost always find a way to skip from one to one to find a place where you are. It's far more formal in some other countries, especially like England, where there's still a very strong guild system for that.